Recording is on. It is September 4th, 2024. This is the Nephio SIG 2 meeting. So for the agenda today, so if you remember last week, I formally proposed that we could spend maybe the coming month plus to do some POCs as simple as we can with alternative technologies, right? And let me list some of them here. The idea is maybe to take like our simplest free 5GC user story, nothing sophisticated, no day two changes or anything, just really deploy it, but with our specialization for, so let's see, for CubeNet.
Actually, TAL OAI may be simpler than free 5GC.
Oh, okay.
Let's even say, only one function, right? One function.
Just one function.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, anything that works most familiar for whoever is doing the POC. It doesn't really matter. We just want to see that specialization can work.
Yeah, because free 5GC needs a kernel module, all those kind of stuff, right? So OAI, it's purely software if you just deploy one core function of OAI.
Okay. Yeah, what else? Liam, do you want to maybe say in words what you're hoping? Liam is a writer, not a talker. All right.
No, I was talking away, but I was on mute. So,
okay.
Yes, but I think I captured it there. So, I mean, we really have to have I think a Big Bang is, it has to be part of the. It's not really an alternative, but it's maybe the first. All but the last bullets are the strategy, and then the tactics, or how do we get there?
Yeah, I mean that would be the next step. If we decide, say, we love Ansible, and then we can start thinking, what would it actually mean to move to that? By the way, an update from me, I spent the long weekend doing some more work on Ansible. I'm very close to being convinced that it could work great for us. I actually didn't have a lot of experience with Ansible Tower, but now that I use it, I'm like, it has inventory management with support for Git repositories. It is remarkably straightforward and just, a pleasure kind of to use. It might, it has a great GUI where you can see like logs and everything from. Anyway, I might be able to show something next week. We'll see, like a demo of using Ansible Tower instead of Porch, for example. So yeah. Anyway,
so that's great news, Tal. One thing I wanted to know from you, when you say Ansible Tower, is it an operator written in Ansible running inside Kubernetes?
Well, actually, yeah, I am deploying it on using the. It's actually AWX, which is the open source version, the non-Red Hat version. So I am installing it on Kubernetes, and it's running against the Postgres database. So I am using it against the TKO backend, right?
Okay.
But just the TKO API server against the database to just get the entities, sites, packages, etc. But it would be trivial to use against any other kind of backend. But yeah, I'm not using any of the TKO controllers. That's the point. Ansible Tower is actually doing the controller, and it's just using a data backend, whatever that is.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's really cool. You can create playbooks that spawn other playbooks. You can see your inventory. You can make dynamic inventories using Ansible. It's remarkably straightforward. I think that this would work. Sorry, I'm kind of going maybe more here than I should, but it would work really well with users, telcos that are already using Ansible Tower, if they have everything set up already. I know TELUS does. I've talked to Sana about that. She's very interested in Ansible Tower. They're happy users of Ansible Tower. So anyway, it's something I hopefully I'll be able to demo next week. Not a complete POC, but just showing that it can work. I don't actually have like a use case with OAI running on it. That would be the next step. So here's my question, right? I hoped at the end of last week's meeting, I asked you all to think about, can we actually do this for the coming month? And is there interest in doing any of these? And I'd like to hear from you now. Can we do it? Is there, go ahead, Rado.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you probably know better. Is Ansible Tower, isn't it like heavily licensed? It's like a trial license of some sort?
So that's my point. AWX is the completely, so everything Red Hat does, and I know this well because I used to work at Red Hat. Yeah, there are downstream like licensed versions, but for everything they have an upstream open source. Well, it's not always open source, but they have like an open source license version. So AWX is what the open source version is called. And no, there are no restrictions on that at all. Of course, if a user wants support from Red Hat, they can buy Ansible Tower, which is equivalent. It just adds support. And I think maybe other features as well, integrating with OpenShift, etc. But yeah.
Yeah, so it's like CentOS kind of deal.
Exactly. Or if you've used OpenStack versus OKD, so the same thing. Yeah. Red Hat likes to use these 3-letter acronyms that mean nothing for their projects. Actually, I kind of copied that idea with TKO. I just gave 3 letters that don't mean anything in particular. Although sometimes I call it Tiny Kubernetes Orchestrator. But yeah, so AWX is what's the kind of open source cloud, but it's easier just to call it Ansible Tower. Yeah. So yeah, so what do you guys think? Is there interest from anybody here in picking one of these and trying to get, say, the OAI use case working on it?
So, Tal, just to be upfront, we discussed internally.
Yeah.
But for us, the challenge at this point of time is to getting the people or the existing people being very busy. We wanted to do, but it's we have a personal issue.
I see.
Really, so yeah.
But when you say we, you would probably be interested in Argo or Ansible Tower, both products that are very Red Hat, dear to Red Hat's heart.
Argo, we internally discussed Argo because I knew you are working on the tower.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that's the, sorry to give that status, but I just want to let you know that we internally discussed about this seriously. And that, so one thing we could do is, I was thinking is, instead of that, probably if I can get somebody from Argo to present something, that's okay. We could try to do that. But doing the POC with Argo at this point of time, given everything, may be tough for us.
Okay.
And
how about
you will do the TKO as well, right? When you do Ansible, that include TKO too?
Well, I would actually, I can easily do this, but I was hoping maybe somebody else where I can work with somebody, because the idea is to collect data and opinions over how feasible it is. I'm very, very biased, right? I designed it because I think it can work, right? But I would really love to hear other people's opinions. Of course, I would work with them and help them in any way, but yeah, it could be an opportunity if people want to take a look. But yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of interest here. Wim, with KubeNet, would there be anybody interested in trying to create one of our user stories with the package? Sorry, I forget, package server? To see if it could work instead of Porch with the, sorry, I forget the name of the additional kind of controller framework for KubeNet.
You mean the
was it?
choreo stuff? Yeah. So,
Yeah, choreo. Yeah, so like,
yeah, so I think the question is also about time, right? Because we are at CubeNet, we are focused on the networking use case right now. So the question is whether we can do OAI in it.
yeah.
I had a small discussion with Isti last week, but yeah, probably I need to follow up with him next week because I'm actually off the next couple of days.
So, yes, Tim, of course, as I said, I'm willing to help, but yes, we have to discuss the deadline. So we haven't discussed porting OAI on top of this yet.
Yeah. So I mean, the
I'm also-
deadline is.
There is
Yeah,
another thing that I'm not sure whether we are going in the right direction. I've created a different opinion on the way we do our, let's say, orchestration, if you will, because it has a lot of, let's say, constraints that I see or that we actually have discovered in KubeNet that I'm addressing. So in other words, I mean, we could do a package server flavor, but I'm not convinced that it's the right way forward, if I'm honest.
You mean that you're working on maybe refactoring how package server and choreo work in KubeNet?
Yeah, so I can do package server. I can do a porch-alike variant, but I'm not even sure it's actually the right way forward, even for in KubeNet, we are convinced it's not the right way forward. I'm not sure whether in Nephew will get convinced about it.
Yeah. Well, I would love. I think we would all love to hear your thoughts, right? I mean, to be honest, like we're framing this as a replacement for Porch because the problem is Porch, right? You know, if Porch was fully supported with Google, but even then, I agree with you. I think it's something that we're at a crossroads, and it's worth examining if we need something else. I mean, to be honest, like none of these is a real replacement for Porch. They're all very different orchestrators. The question is, can we do the same use cases? So,
no, but for example, yeah, correct. So that's probably the first thing that you want to cover. But then what I seen is that even that framework is not sufficient for what people want eventually. You see, that's what we start to conclude upon within or have concluded actually upon in the KubeNet community. And yeah, so that was one of the discussions with Isti. We can do a flavor that is Porch alike, right? But then the question is, are we spending the right effort eventually? But I can share in a couple of weeks if you want what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think that would be great. So I guess you're saying you don't find it really worthwhile to do a POC.
See. No. Don't get me wrong. I think it's useful to do the POCs, right? The problem, what I see in general is the following, right? To actually form an opinion about stuff, you almost have to get your hands dirty for a while to figure out the let's say everything around it. You see, so we have spent quite a bit of time with Porch to get to an understanding. What are the limitations, what are the shortcomings and stuff like that. It didn't come in a week or in even if you, so in other words, what I'm trying to say is that if you want to form a conclusion, you have to spend quite a bit of time or dealing with the details, right? So it's not, so let's say if two people do a POC, that's good for the people, right? And they form an opinion and they say this is good and this is bad. But there might be the people that haven't done that, it's very hard for them to judge. You see?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, there's some noise right now.
Yeah, I'm also in a bad space actually, by the way. So
I know there's like sawing.
Well explained, Wim. I think you explained it very well. Good. Thank you for that context.
Here's my thought. I mean, I'm basically in agreement with you, right? Here's the issue. We're at a crossroads right now. I mean, so we can give this a year, right, to experiment with things. But I think we need to find a way forward for Nefio. Now, the idea is, yeah, the two people or whoever work on a POC, they'll have the knowledge. But the idea, my idea, was that in the summit, we would give presentations over these alternatives and have discussions over them. It doesn't have to be the final. It's more about potential, right? I'm hoping that we can reach a decision then, but if we feel that we can't as a community, then we'll continue looking. But we might know which of these are dead ends, right? Let's say we find out that Flux is just like really not a good fit, or Argo is not a good fit, so we can remove it from the list, right? And we can boil it down to our options, and with a thought, nothing is necessarily static, but you see the issue, right? We can continue trying to develop Porch and making it work for us and maybe redesigning it, but we're really hoping that we can join with another existing, more mature solution that could alleviate that development work and responsibility from us, right? So, yeah.
So I agree with you about so the only way to get to something like that is to make people's hands dirty, right? Now, what I'm trying to say is that it's going to take time, in my view, to actually get people to do that due diligence. That's my point. But if you never start, you'll never conclude. So it just will take longer. So that's okay. the thing, right? So yeah, so I don't know how it goes. So probably we have to have people do this, right? So I think it's the right way forward. Tal, don't get me wrong, right? But what I'm trying to say, to come to a conclusion, even in the summit, I think is a bit too optimistic.
I accept that. Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to be two things. First of all, we have the opportunity in the summit to be together, so I think that would be very effective to use it for these kinds of discussions. But I want to come there with as much data as we can, and not just theoretically, oh, I read the Argo docs and they look to be okay. As you said, we need to get dirty, so our hands dirty. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if we'll be able to reach a conclusion in October. I think you're probably right. I accept that. But we be able to move forward and at least maybe remove things from consideration, which will also be a big advantage, right? So we can know what to focus on further. Yeah, I'm just trying to use the opportunity the best I can, but in my proposal here. Fikra, please, you had your hand up for a bit.
Maybe this has been already considered, but would it be of use of our time to determine what are the major shortcomings and limitations of Porch, and potentially what we could replace or upgrade within that system?
So I think SIG1 is taking that perspective, right? So SIG1 is really trying to get requirements in order and kind of comparing it in terms of features and requirements. So there's that work. But I think what SIG Automation can do, I mean, our requirements is what we have right now, right? Because we have our user stories that are already running with Free5GC and OAI. The question is, can we take those same user stories, the same package structure, or similar, right? Basically implement them with any of these, right? So not even thinking about requirements or everything. The requirements are just that the user story runs, that you can like create a deployment based on a blueprint and it actually goes there, right? Even if it's very hacky at this point, right?
Yeah, but my kind of point was I don't think SIG1 would have a hand in this at all, but it would be more in relation to what we know is what the users of Nefio Porch now at the moment know is broken or isn't working correctly, or as we assume, and if there is anything that is pluggable to replace that piece of functionality, or the like, as part of a migration or a move, a move over rather than a cut over.
So the point about migrating is like, whoa, that's another step forward. I think I'm thinking about this as more of a feasibility test. Like, is it even possible, say, to migrate to Argo? How we would do that would be like our plan later if Argo seems like a good idea, right? So it seems to me that people think this is a good idea, but we just don't know if a month or more than a month, we don't know yet when the summit will be in October, if we have enough time. I kind of feel like this is. I feel like these POCs should just take a few days of messing around. You know, a POC is a POC. It doesn't have to be perfect. It could be very hacky, a lot of hard-coded stuff. But the point is just to get that feeling of feasibility and see if it's even possible. Like, let's say, for example, can Argo workflows really be used to create a specialization pipeline at scale for, you know, deploying, fanning out, say, a single blueprint to 100 sites, something like that, right? Questions like that. Anybody else want to pipe in? Oh, we see a few. Isti, please go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to add that while listing what is wrong with Porch, that I'm completely on board with, let's not forget about writing down what is great with Porch, or at least I know that multiple people said it's multiple times, that don't forget what is currently the unique selling point that we are telling about Nephew. And for me, I usually say free, but all free is tightly related to Porch and hydration and everything that Porch enables. So I'm just saying not to throw out the baby with the water. So yeah. If we are thinking of a replacement, let's make sure, okay, it's perfect that it works, it is maintained by others, these are all great things. But in the meantime, if it would mean that we would be just one of the users of Argo, let's say, and we do not have any unique, distinctive, comparative advantage of other orchestrators or, I don't know, management systems out there, then I would feel that it is, so then we shouldn't do that. That's it.
Yeah, good point to balance Wim's point. I mean, there are two edges here, right? On the one hand, redesigning how we do orchestration. On the other hand, the question I'm asking is smaller here. It's just picking the technology, right? And seeing if the technology has the potential to be able to basically do our designs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're all basically aligned here, my sense. Bala, go ahead.
Yeah, similar sentiment. I think it's good to have, you know, like maybe a one-page document of just, you know, 2 columns, pros and cons of Porch, right? And then each demo, like let's say the book, I always view Porch in a slightly simplistic way than anybody who has worked hands-on with it. It's a demultiplexer with an ability to customize each output. That's what I would say it in a single sentence if I were to say what Porch is.
Agreed.
So it has the ability to take one input and target multiple outputs. Target multiple targets for the same input. And it has the ability to customize each output based on certain criteria. And then it does it automatically. So that is the USP of Porch, if you ask me. And obviously the input and output are KRM resources. So, and then what it does internally, it's okay. It runs the KPT pipeline. It does with the Git. It's all implementation thing. But from the capability perspective, that's what Porch does.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and if we were to, so essentially, it's an automation tool, right? So it's an automation tool. So if we were to do this is the pro. What is the con? For example, the time taken for each. Let's say we are doing one deployment today. We are doing one deployment of each functions today, and what is the time it's taken? I don't know. Since I don't know the internals of Porch, I cannot comment intelligently on that. But what I share is the pain of the time it takes to deploy even a single network function.
Yeah. Let's separate these two things, right? I think we obviously know that Porch is pretty broken and will take a lot of effort from us to get it production worthy. I mean, let's ignore that for now, because the bigger problem is that are we able to do that as a community? We don't think so, right?
Yes.
We really think that it's.
The reason I'm saying that, is if any of these POCs, right? For example, let's say you do the Ansible Tower POC, then that POC proves, okay, this POC can take a single input and it can distribute to multiple targets and it can customize each output. That is essentially the feature of Porch that we're doing, but it can do better at scale and it is more performant. And if we get into those kind of conclusions, I think probably that's what it's, at least personally, I would like to see out of these POCs. A slide saying pros and cons and how the new solution, will it compromise any pros of Porch? Or will it solve any cons of Porch? I think probably that would be a good outcome of these POCs. It doesn't have to be exhaustive, but at least it can educate us, okay, the new solution will do the automation abilities of Porch. Yes, that mark is ticked. The new solution does it in a more performant way and it's more scalable. So probably it's going to solve one big con of Porch. I think if we can come to those kind of conclusions, even though we do not decide which technology that we want to go with, at least we will have some high-level understanding of each of these POCs.
Thank you, Ba. That's exactly what I want as well. I thank you for expressing it in another way that I hope people can understand. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to. Isti, go ahead.
Also, again, I agree very well. And I just want to add that in an ideal world, one of the POCs would be completely rewritten Porch. What you described is so little part of Porch. Porch code base is so bloated and so error prone and few of us suspect that this slowness doesn't come from the concept, but it comes from the actual implementation. So in an ideal world, one of the POCs would be completely rewritten Porch that is rewritten from scratch and only contains that 10% of the code that is needed for this kind of functionality and doesn't contain OCI support and function repositories and Google Cloud specific code and everything else. So that would be a good or better baseline to compare the others with. Unfortunately, I know that in the real world, it will not happen because it probably doesn't worth the effort to.
Well, the only one on this list that does fit that is TKO, because I designed it very specifically as a kind of Porch 2.0, right? So it absolutely matches. That would be a very easy POC to do, right? It's just missing the user story. But the difference from the other ones is that it's obviously not a mature platform with a community behind it, right? So with TKO, if we decide to go that way, that means we own it. The question is, could we own it? I think so, but I need to hear other opinions. KubeNet is also special in that it's brand new, but it is forming a community around it, and it's very telco centric. So the thing is, every item on this list has its own story, right? And pros and cons. That's why SIG 1 is kind of making that high level pros and cons. But for us here, the question I'm asking is more technological, right? Like, would these things even work? All the questions, Bala said, are they stable? We assume that, Ansible Tower, Argo, and Flux are stable, right? They've been used in production for a while. Ansible Tower a very long while, right? So, yeah, I mean, the big table to make the decision involves a lot of different columns, right? There are pros and cons to everything, right? You might have something that has great technology, but then you're like, well, we're worried about the future of it. For example, Flux. The future of Flux is, if you pardon my pun, in flux. We don't know if Flux will really, if the community will be able to take it and move forward without its corporate support. So Flux might be amazing for us, but then technologically, but we might be worried about putting our eggs in that basket, right? So Yeah, but you know what? SIG 1, I think, can take a look at the higher level stuff. But as Wim said, we're the SIG that gets their hands dirty, right? And that's what I'm hoping we can achieve here. So, guys, I see no more hands are up. Maybe it's a good idea to move to the rest of the agenda unless people want to keep going with this. My suggestion is that, well, you know, we can do what we can, right? I can do the Ansible Tower one. I can also do a TKO one if nobody else, you know, but I kind of feel bad giving another presentation from me. If somebody wants to work with me, please go ahead. And I don't think it will take too much work to create a POC there. Isti, you said you might be able to create something with KubeNet. The two we're missing are really Argo and Flux. Yeah, Bala, here's a question. So you and Vish and Alexei are the three Red Hatters here. So you're saying you don't have resources to work on it right now. Would you be able to commit like a little bit, maybe to pair with somebody, or nothing at all?
Actually, I'm spread so thin in the, as you know, with Wish and Daryl are here. I don't want to put them in spot, but probably can we give that answer? Can we give that answer in Slack?
Absolutely. I'm going to try to advertise this on Slack too. I know there are people who are not in the meeting right now, yeah, and who might have time. Yeah, people constantly say they want to contribute, but they have trouble, and we annoyingly still don't have recordings. So there are people who are just out of the loop. So maybe I'll try on Slack or even on email to advertise needs here. I know some of you have a lot of experience with Flux, right? Is it Ericsson folk?
Sorry.
Do you guys have experience with Flux?
Yeah. But I don't think we'd be interested in doing a POC after this first, to be honest.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, that's reasonable. Anybody want to work with me on this?
I'll work with you on the TKO. I'm actually playing with it at the moment. So, and I also, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind having a look at the Ansible Tower as well.
Yeah. How about I'll do it this way, because I'm pretty far ahead with Ansible Tower. So, but we can meet together for both of these POCs, and you can lead one, I'll lead the other. How's that?
It sounds good if it works out. Okay, let's see where we are in a few weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. We should have like at least a month. I don't know when. Is the summit going to be late October or early October? Do you remember?
Well, they were at the TSC last week. They said the second or third week in October. So it's the week starting the week
two dates actually. There are 2 dates. One is ideally they want to do it around 15, 16, 17 time frame. If the dates, because there is something related to ORAN the subsequent week, because people are traveling for that in Arizona. So if that is the ideal date, if for any reason Kandan is unable to obtain the rooms, the conference rooms in Google, then the alternative date is October 9th and 10th.
I see. Okay. Thanks for that. Well, you know, guys, things that don't make it for the summit, as Wim pointed out, will probably not reach a decision in the summit, so we can continue having presentation afterwards. But I would say that Argo is very high on our list, right? I think we really need kind of we all have an idea that Argo could potentially work, even though it's very different from all the rest, but it's big, it has a lot of components, it's very, you know, cloud native, lots of support. It would be wonderful if Argo can work for us, but we just don't know, right? So anyway, I'll advertise on Slack and maybe somebody will pop up and be interested in working with that. And since I'm really the one driving this as much as I can, most passionately, I'll work with anybody who wants to do any of these to try to help them organize a POC. So just need somebody to do the actual work and get the experience. But I can help them like in terms of designing and setting what the goals are, etc. Okay. I wonder if we can move on. The rest of the agenda. So how about this? I've been chasing Fikra for a while to do this, and it might be fit well with what we're talking about now, because we'll see some internals of Porch. Fikra, would you be okay doing this overview?
I can do, yeah, I can
Informal.
It's informal.
Yeah.
I'll try and make sense of the jumble that my brain is at the moment, trying to make sense of what's going on. But yeah, I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So let me hand it over to you.
Oh, 1 second. Try and get screen share and desktop 2. Okay, is that visible?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah. Where is my? Okay, Zoom does this silly thing that really annoys me. Anyway, yeah. So we're looking at issues around this, the high package approval time. So mainly related to the end-to-end tester infra runs. I think Saga raised this early on, but I think it was John. We were aware of it prior. 1 second, sorry. This one. Yeah, so it was picked up in terms of when Porch there was these changes made to Porch, etc. But yeah, essentially the approval times shot up. So I started looking at where we needed to focus on. And yeah, I dug down a little bit, and it was in relation to, so you can see kind of timings there from a while back. That was from Victor. But yeah, so it turned out it was in relation to the actual get, so the using the controller runtime clients get from for the package revision. It was essentially hitting the cache, which wasn't being updated. I know there is ways of controlling the cache time to live, etc. on the client, but to circumvent that, I decided to move to using this API reader, which essentially just hits the API directly. And yeah, parameterized. So this is kind of the initial iteration, first iteration. Parameterized this requeue duration as well for when the reconciler gets requeued. But this reduced the times considerably. That's just formatting. What else? So yeah, that kind of cut the times down. There's kind of a few kind of results, outputs and stuff. But we were still having issues around how the approval was kicking in. And the initial, so the way it's designed, in that the original controller, the original, yeah, was that so it uses this annotation to say, only approve the first revision or the initial revision essentially. So this is, so it checks the readiness gates on the revision and only publishes it if there isn't an existing published revision in the system. And yeah, we kind of felt that wasn't really fit for purpose. And I think John originally had kind of ideas to add alternate policies around the auto approval. So that's where I went next. So I looked at then adding this always approval policy. So where am I? This is mostly Go mod updates, but yeah. So I added a new approval policy always. And I also removed things like we had multiple clients in here. I'm not sure of the rationale for that. Maybe someone can educate me on that. But I also passed in, so instead of using this Porch client for this function, essentially checks the package variants. It checks that the package variant is ready. And so in essence, that's doing a get on the API also. Instead of going to, you going to the cache which speeds things up as well. Added some additional logging, etc. But the logic is, I guess, for the always policy approval, so it should approve any package, any revision, essentially. So with that, then, so I've been running this more times than I would like. But yeah, so the timings have gone down considerably. These two are kind of deploying. So this is a free flight GC use case. This is deploying the regional cluster. This is your two edge clusters. I'm not sure what we could do around those to get the timings down. But if you look at, say, this one is deploying the AMF SMF, which even before this change, in terms of, oh, sorry, I also changed the generic specializer to use the API reader also, for fetching the package revision and the package revision resources, which cut the times down massively. So yeah, that's the kind of second iteration. It hasn't been merged yet because we're still debugging. We've an issue around the kind of last use case. This one is odd. This is essentially this is scaling one of the UPFs, and it seems to sit for a very long time, and config sync doesn't pick it up for about 5 minutes, 6 minutes, which I'm not too sure why that's taking so long, because it's merged on the Git repo, but config sync just sits and doesn't pick it up for 5 minutes. And we've issues around.
So the complete time here includes the config sync deployment. It's not just the approval.
This one, no, this one doesn't require. So this one is essentially the update of the UPF package. I can show you here so it updates UPF on the Edge repo. I can show you the commit graph. I'm using the commit graph quite regularly. It's just quite handy. But this is the UPF update. So it essentially just patches, or it updates some of the the throughput parameters on the UPF, and it gets approved and merged on main. But for some reason it doesn't get it sits. So the script essentially sits and waits for it to. This is the run here. Where is it now? Vertical scale UPF and edge clusters. Yeah. So it runs its runs its mutation in the pipeline, but then it sits and waits for. So where are we now? 41. Yeah. So it sits and waits for the new UPF pod to be deployed on edge 1. But yeah, takes about 6 minutes. But as far as I'm aware, the only other actor there is config sync, right? To deploy what's the latest patch, the latest commit on that repo, because we're using root sync, right? Anyway, but it's just something we could maybe look at again, to kind of cut the times down even more. But yeah, that's where I'm at. The only little issue that I'm still trying to debug in that the packages do still get pushed through inadvertently I'm not sure why this is happening. I'm not 100% sure, but say it always seems to be the AMF package that gets pushed through, and unfortunately now it gets stuck in a proposed state because the reconciler. So I'm running the Nephew controllers via VS Code onto a VM using this SSH Remote Explorer and so I'm kind of running it live from here, but for some reason the generic reconciler or specializer even, sorry, doesn't it's I think Ben maybe would be good to input on this, but in terms of its the package variant gets into an invalid state. I won't go debugging this now, but essentially I think there's an issue around the kept file being updated inadvertently, and then the package variant controller clones it again. So it does a fresh clone of the package. and pushes it in, which it shouldn't, you know, because but that's I'm not there's some kind of timing or race condition there maybe. But yeah, overall, other than we're looking at, I was debugging it with this to you, we're probably looking at PortCTL probably does need to, because the script itself for that's this 009 script, the script itself, you know, it just pulls a copy of the package, updates it with these values, and then just, you know, goes quickly through, you know, push, propose, approve. Whereas for me, I think we got away with this before because the system was so slow. But now I think we should be checking that there needs to be some mechanism. I've added clumsy sleeps there which aren't working, but there should be some mechanism that the PortCTL shouldn't propose a package if the gates aren't green. Like what happens for you know, your other packages say. You know, so your conditions, your readiness gates, this is essentially, so the main two readiness gates on these packages is this one and this one, I think, and the same for SMF. You know, so the gates don't get, so in this scenario, the gates get switched to false or not ready, and but the script proposes and approves it anyway. So then, you know, you end up in a state where the package has been proposed and approved, but the readiness gates or the conditions haven't been, or the specializers haven't run successfully. If that makes sense to anybody here. But yeah, so that you know, there are kind of weird stuff. I thought this was fixed as well. There's an issue around the parameter refs being duplicated in the SMF deployment. I thought this was, I remember there was something around this before that may have been fixed, or I thought it was fixed.
I thought it was fixed in ARC too.
Yeah, so this seems, so it seems to duplicate the parameter refs in the SMF deployment YAML. And obviously then there are consecutive updates. So this essentially comes in from the dependency, and this dependency update essentially comes through the UPF, the Edge 1 UPF, and then the final patch obviously is for the update to its own parameters, so the SMF capacity. That it was a bit of a whirlwind, but that's essentially, so yeah. If you look at, you know, if we look at the old timings, this was my main objective, was to get these times done. So, you know, if you look at these times here, like, so, you know, 664, 855, you know, 1019, and you're done within minutes. You know, I was actually surprised at this one. This is AMF SMF. This used to take, you know, at least 6 minutes. So yeah.
Yeah, I have a more general question. I've always been a little confused with the design of the approval controller and the justification that it even needs to be a separate controller, that it just seems to introduce so much complexity, right? Because the whole issue where we can't lock Git anyway, right? So we're checking against the Porch client. My question is this, like the way I implemented in TKO, again, just as a POC, was that every time I make a change to a package, deployment package, I check, is it done? If it's done, then I check if it should be auto-approved. And if it is, it's approved immediately.
Yeah.
Like, why do you think it's important to have this as like a completely separate controller with all the complexity that introduces?
That's a good question.
If you know, I don't know.
I wish we had John on the call, but we don't.
I mean, my opinion.
Yeah.
My opinion is that sometimes you want to do a validation, which we are not doing, right? So you want to actually validate that the output that you produce is actually workable. And you don't want to combine that in the same system necessarily. We have the same requirement in KubeNet. So people want to basically do validations on, let's say, another system to be able to validate whether what you produce is actually okay. And so, yeah, So there is
Yeah, well, yeah,
there is
like we,
at least there is various communities that actually want to have separation of concern for various functions, right?
So what I do in TKO at least is nothing is allowed into the backend unless it's validated. So it never lets
correct. So, but you cannot do a full validation that it actually works. It's the same with we have the same thing. I do the same thing in Choreo, right? So basically everything is validated syntactically and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that the result you produce is actually what people want and what would deploy. Yeah. So, and that's something that you have to separate.
So TKO lets you write validation plugins. So the plugin can be as sophisticated as you want it to be, right? So it can do anything, right? You write it in Python. So it's not just validating schema. You could potentially really validate that it is ready to deploy, and you can check it against, other systems. For example, if there's an IP address, you can check to make sure that it's not already used, or else that's invalid.
Yeah, but sometimes people want to even deploy on the system. You will not have a validation to that. Right?
I mean,
so
validation generally is the best effort.
I think my sense is that validation you can do in your own system as much as you can, but my experience so far in the community, in the Kubernetes community, is that people have dedicated frameworks to do that, and you have to allow those frameworks to be used, right? So as such, having an ability to decouple is nice. That doesn't mean so the problem that you have in ports right now, in my view, is that they have too many actors that are happening at the same time, right? So that is the challenge. And although the conditions have an ability to allow for that, right? The issue is also in Choreo, what I've seen or what I've learned is that what we do right now in ports is client-side apply, which leads to all kinds of concurrency challenges. So in Choreo, for example, I use only server-side apply, which solves that problem, right? So this is part of the issue I think that you see. I think Fiacra is that sometimes it might be that the approval thing, it's okay, right? But the other pieces are not done yet, right? So as such, you get into the issue is right now, everything is client-side driven. So it might be that at some point, I mean, in a concurrent system, you can lead to inconsistencies, right? And that is the challenge, I think, with the way it's implemented right now. Now, I think important that you can solve potentially, but you have to look. I think the way to solve that in ports is server-side apply.
Well, another solution, we discussed this in the past, Isti weighed on this quite a lot, that we define that you can only use Porch through the Porch API, so we can introduce our own locking using something like Zookeeper, etc. Because the problem, Git itself cannot be locked. But because our GitOps philosophy is that people can do stuff to Git without going through Porch, well, everything goes out the window because Git does not support locking. I think this is a big challenge for us.
But that's another way. That's another thing that you can solve, right? So that's another problem I see in architecture of ports that is not right. Is that how does Git use development? Right? So remote development is you clone and you build your environment and you basically do edits in that. And at some point you say you're done, right? And then you share, right? That's not what ports does.
Yeah, but I think I can't see my time because Zoom is blocking my bloody time on my screen. But I think we're nearly up. But I think overall, this is what I'm looking for to reduce these times. Redesigning how this works, absolutely. Removing this delay that was introduced probably to avoid scenarios where there are too many actors changing stuff, and and equally here. But yeah, I totally agree. That the auto approval thing. I think it's useful. I think people would use this in the wild, because but obviously validation, all that stuff needs to happen somewhere, and if this is the script's fault, essentially, not the script's fault, but the script doesn't care if the pipeline has completed and the readiness gates are green, so it just pushes it in. I believe that's the issue now, but we got away with it before because everything was so slow. That's my rough understanding. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, well, we are just about out of time. Thank you so much for this. I think this is helpful. Yeah, it remains for me, despite having quite a lot of experience with Porch and everything, parts of it seem over-engineered to me. And this was one of them. And I was hoping maybe from your perspective, you would have an idea telling us that, hey, it's not over-engineered. It's actually doing exactly what it's supposed to do. But I think you're a little unsure as well. So yeah, anyway, the bigger questions over how to redesign this, in my opinion, should wait until we decide if we actually are committed to continue working on a Porch. Otherwise, I feel like it would just be a waste of words, right? Because if we're using Argo, or we're using whatever Argo is using, all this question about auto approval might not even be relevant, right? Go ahead, Liam. Yeah,
just on what Finka is facing there, I think is a combination of maybe 3 or 4 state machines, as Jim pointed out. The SMF and AMF each have conditions that both must look at, and then the controller is trying to work on that as well. And it's just I think what you're right. What needs to we need to rethink just do we really need it to be that complicated? And it's all asynchronous as well. It's really difficult to debug. So and it also comes back to the way that the tasks and the patches work internally in Porch. That's always going to make this really difficult to.
Yeah. I do think it touches on some very deep open questions regarding Porch locking and multiple users accessing the same. What happens if you have a merge conflict too, and does everything really break? So there is code in Porch that kind of deals with it, but I'm like, no idea how that actually would work in a real world environment. Anyway, I think this was very helpful. I hope you all agree. We're out of time for today. My next step regarding the POCs, I will try to advertise everything on Slack and email to see if somebody can get. I think the high priority is Argo. Flux perhaps lost all interest. We'll see. If Ericsson is not interested, maybe nobody else will be as well. But I think, Isti, are you clear on CubeNet? I'll reach out to you afterwards. Okay, we're out of time. All right, thank you, everybody, and see you next week, and discuss on Slack if there's stuff urgent in between meetings. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Happy autumn. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.